Whisper from the Wall. Chapter 1. A New Place. Clara Martin arrived in Porto on a rainy afternoon. The sky was gray, and the streets were wet and quiet. She carried 2 suitcases and a backpack. Her new apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building near the river. The building had a faded yellow facade, iron balconies, and a heavy wooden door that creaked when opened. Clara liked the charm of old places. She believed they had stories hidden in their walls. She was 29 years old, quiet by nature, and worked as a translator. Her job allowed her to work from home, which suited her personality. She didn't enjoy crowds or loud places. She preferred silence, books, and long walks. Moving to Porto was her way of starting fresh. She had lived in busy cities before, but now she wanted peace. The apartment seemed perfect. It had high ceilings, large windows, and wooden floors that made soft sounds when she walked. The walls were thick, painted in pale colors, and the air smelled like old paper and dust. Clara spent her first day unpacking. She placed her books on the shelves, set up her desk near the window, and made tea in the small kitchen. She looked out at the narrow street below and watched people walk by. Everything felt calm. That night, she went to bed early. The room was dark and quiet. She listened to the wind outside and the ticking of the old clock on the wall. But just before sleep, she heard something strange. It was a whisper. Very soft, almost like a breath. It came from the wall beside her bed. Clara sat up and listened. The sound was not loud, but it was clear. She couldn't understand the words, but she knew it was not the wind. It was not the pipes or the floor. It was a voice. A whisper from inside the wall. She waited, thinking it might be a neighbor. But her apartment was on the corner of the building. The wall was shared with no other room. Behind it were only bricks and empty space. She checked the hallway and listened again. Nothing. She returned to bed, confused but calm. The whisper came again, just once, and then stopped. The next morning, Clara tried to forget about it. She told herself it was her imagination. Maybe she was tired. Maybe the building made strange sounds. But deep inside, she felt something was different. The apartment was beautiful, but it held something quiet and hidden. She didn't feel afraid. She felt curious. She spent the day exploring the rooms. She touched the walls, looked at the corners, and opened every drawer. She found old nails, pieces of wallpaper, and a small crack near the baseboard. She didn't find anything unusual, but the feeling stayed. The apartment was silent, but not empty. It felt like someone had left a part of themselves behind. Clara continued her work as usual. She translated documents, answered emails, and made notes in her journal. But every night, just before sleep, the whisper returned. It was always soft, always from the same wall, and always without clear words. She began to record the sound with her phone. She played it back during the day, trying to understand. The voice was faint, but real. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't want to sound strange. She believed in logic, in facts, in reason. But she also believed that old places carried memories. Maybe the wall was trying to speak. Maybe something had happened here long ago. Clara didn't know yet. But she felt the beginning of something. A quiet mystery. A whisper waiting to be heard. She started writing down everything. The time, the sound, the feeling. She made notes about the building, the street, and the history of the area. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she knew she had to listen. The whisper was not loud. It was not angry. It was patient. And Clara was ready to hear it. Chapter 2. First Contact. Clara Martin continued to hear the whisper every night. It always came from the same wall, just before she fell asleep. The voice was soft, almost like a breath, but it was clear enough to record. Clara didn't speak Portuguese, so she couldn't understand the words. But she felt that the voice was trying to say something important. She decided to record the sounds using her phone. She played the recording the next morning and listened carefully. The whisper was slow and broken, but it repeated the same phrases. Clara used an online translator to understand the words. She typed them one by one, trying to match the sounds. The phrases were short but disturbing. One said, "I saw it." Another said, "They forgot me." The last one was, "Key under the floor." Clara felt a chill in her body. These were not random words. They sounded like pieces of a story. A sad story. A hidden story. She didn't know what to do at first. She had never experienced anything like this. She was a logical person. She believed in facts, not ghosts. But the voice was real. The words were real. And they were coming from inside her apartment. Clara decided to learn more about the building. She visited the local library and asked for old records. She searched online and read articles about the neighborhood. After a few hours, she found something that made her stop. 10 years ago, a young woman named Ana Luisa had disappeared from the same apartment. She was 24 years old, a student, and lived alone. One night, she was gone. No signs of struggle. No goodbye. Her family searched for her, but the case was never solved. The police had no suspects. The neighbors said they heard nothing. Ana Luisa simply vanished. Clara read the article again and again. The name, the age, the apartment, it all matched. She looked at the photo of Anna. The woman had dark hair, soft eyes, and a quiet smile. Clara felt something strange. She didn't know Anna, but she felt close to her. She felt like Anna had left something behind. Something that was still trying to speak. Clara returned home and sat near the wall. She placed her hand on the cold surface and closed her eyes. She didn't hear the whisper during the day, but she felt the silence. It was not empty. It was waiting. That night, the whisper came again. Clara recorded it and listened. The same phrases. The same sadness. She began to write everything down in a notebook. She made a list of the words, the times, and her feelings. She didn't know where it would lead, but she knew she had to follow it. She started to look around the apartment more carefully. She checked the floor, the walls, the corners. She remembered the phrase, "Key under the floor." She tapped the wooden boards and listened for a hollow sound. Near the wall, she found one board that moved slightly. It was loose. She used a spoon to lift it gently. Underneath, she found a small metal key and a folded piece of paper. Her hands shook as she opened it. The paper had a name and a date. It said, Ana Luisa, March 2004. Clara stared at it for a long time. This was not a dream. This was real. The whisper had led her to something hidden. Something forgotten. She didn't know what the key opened, but she knew it was part of the story. She placed it in a box and kept it safe. Clara felt a mix of fear and curiosity. She didn't know why the voice had chosen her. She didn't know what had happened to Anna. But she felt a responsibility. She felt that Anna's story was waiting to be told. The whisper was not just a sound. It was a message. A call for truth. Clara was ready to listen. She was ready to search. And she was no longer alone. Chapter 3. Traces of the Past. Clara Martin spent the next few days thinking about the whisper and the strange message it carried. The words she had translated stayed in her mind. Key under the floor was not just a phrase. It was a direction. Clara knew she had to search more carefully. She had already found one loose floorboard, but now she wanted to check every corner of the apartment. She moved furniture, lifted rugs, and tapped the wooden boards with her fingers. Most of them were solid, but near the wall where the whisper came from, she found another board that sounded hollow. She used a small knife to lift the edge. The board came up slowly, and underneath she saw dust, old nails, and a small metal key. Next to the key was a folded piece of paper. Clara picked it up gently. The paper was yellow and fragile. She opened it and saw a name written in faded ink, Ana Luisa. Below the name was a date, March 2004. Clara's heart beat faster. This was not a coincidence. The whisper had led her to something real. She placed the key and the note in a small box and sat down at her desk. She opened her laptop and searched for more information about Ana Luisa. She typed the name and the date into the city archive website. After a few minutes, she found an old newspaper article. It was short, but it told the story of a young woman who had disappeared from her apartment in Porto. Anna was 24 years old, a university student, and lived alone. One night, she was gone. No one saw her leave. Her family reported her missing, but the police found no clues. The case was never solved. Clara read the article several times. She looked at the photo of Anna. The woman had long dark hair and a soft expression. Clara felt a strange connection. She didn't know Anna, but she felt close to her. She imagined Anna walking through the same rooms, touching the same walls, and hearing the same sounds. Clara wondered what Anna had felt in her final days. Was she afraid? Was she trying to escape? Was she trying to leave a message? The article mentioned a neighbor who had lived in the building at the time. He was a man in his 40s, quiet and polite. After Anna's disappearance, he moved away and left the country. The police had questioned him, but there was no evidence. Clara wrote down his name and searched for more details. She didn't find much, but she kept looking. She believed the whisper was Anna's voice. It didn't ask for help directly, but it guided her step by step. Clara began to keep a journal. She wrote down everything she found, every sound she heard, and every feeling she had. She didn't know where the path would lead, but she felt she was part of something important. The apartment was no longer just a place to live. It was a place of memory. A place where the past was still alive. She started to notice small things. A mark on the wall that looked like a handprint. A scratch on the floor near the door. A loose tile in the bathroom. These were not signs of damage. They were signs of someone who had lived there before. Clara didn't feel afraid. She felt curious. She felt responsible. She spent hours reading about missing persons, old buildings, and forgotten stories. She visited the local library and asked for help. She spoke with a historian who knew about the neighborhood. He told her that many buildings in Porto had secrets. Some were beautiful, some were sad. Clara listened carefully and took notes. At night, the whisper continued. It was soft, but it felt stronger. Clara didn't try to stop it. She welcomed it. She believed it was leading her to the truth. She didn't know why Anna had chosen her, but she accepted the role. She was no longer just a translator. She was a listener. A seeker. A witness. The key she had found was still a mystery. It didn't match any lock in the apartment. Clara kept it close, hoping it would make sense later. She believed every piece had a purpose. Every trace of the past was part of a bigger story. She didn't need to understand everything at once. She just needed to keep going. Clara felt changed. She was still quiet, still careful, but now she was more aware. She saw meaning in small things. She felt the weight of history in every step. The whisper was not just a sound. It was a bridge between two lives. And Clara was ready to cross it. Chapter 4. Dangerous Answers. Clara Martin spent more time searching through the apartment. She no longer saw it as just a place to live. It had become a puzzle, and she was determined to solve it. The whisper continued each night, growing stronger and more urgent. Clara felt that the voice was guiding her, showing her where to look and what to notice. She followed her instincts and began to check places she had ignored before. Behind a loose panel in the hallway, she found a small wooden box. Inside were old letters, faded photographs, and handwritten notes. The paper was yellow and fragile, and the ink had started to fade. Clara read each letter carefully. They were written by Anna Luisa. The handwriting was soft and emotional. Anna had written about her life, her fears, and her growing sense of danger. She mentioned someone named Miguel. Clara recognized the name from the article she had read earlier. Miguel had been the owner of the apartment before Anna. He was a lawyer, respected in the community, but Anna's words told a different story. In one letter, Anna wrote about feeling watched. She said she had received strange messages and felt unsafe in her own home. Another note described a conversation with Miguel that made her uncomfortable. She didn't accuse him directly, but her words were full of warning. Clara felt a chill as she read. These were not just letters. They were signs of something dark. Something hidden. Clara placed the letters and photos in a folder. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself. She needed help. She contacted a local journalist named Tomas who had written about missing persons before. She sent him copies of the letters and explained what she had found. Tomas was interested and agreed to meet her. Clara told him everything she knew, including the whisper and the key under the floor. She didn't expect him to believe the paranormal part, but she hoped he would see the truth in the documents. That night, Clara returned home feeling nervous. She sat in her room and waited. The whisper came again, but this time it was louder. The voice repeated two new phrases. "They will come," and "don't trust them." Clara felt fear rise in her chest. The voice was no longer calm. It was warning her. She didn't know who they were, but she understood that danger was near. She checked the locks on her doors and windows. She turned off the lights and sat in silence. Her mind was full of questions. Had someone seen her searching? Was Miguel still watching the apartment? Was someone trying to stop her from speaking? Clara didn't sleep that night. She stayed awake, listening to every sound. The whisper came again, softer this time, like a breath in the dark. The next morning, Tomas called her. He had started looking into Miguel's past. He found records of complaints, quiet rumors, and one old police report that had never been followed up. Miguel had left the country shortly after Anna's disappearance. He had moved to Brazil and started a new life. Clara felt her heart race. The pieces were coming together. The letters, the key, the whisper, they all pointed to Miguel. Clara continued her research. She visited the city archive again and found a copy of the apartment's ownership history. Miguel had lived there for 5 years before Anna. He had sold the apartment quickly after she vanished. Clara also found a note from a neighbor who had moved away. It mentioned strange noises and a woman crying at night. Clara added this to her folder. She felt afraid, but she didn't stop. She knew the truth was close. The whisper had led her this far, and she trusted it. She didn't know what would happen next, but she was ready. She had become part of Anna's story. She had become the voice that Anna no longer had. Clara looked at the wall where the whisper came from. She placed her hand on the cold surface and closed her eyes. She whispered back, not with words, but with silence. She was listening. She was ready. And she would not turn away. Chapter 5. The Reveal. The story that Clara Martin had helped uncover was finally shared with the public. Tomas, the journalist she had contacted, published a detailed article in the local newspaper. It included Ana Luisa's letters, the photographs, the note under the floor, and the strange whisper that had led Clara to search. The article didn't mention ghosts or paranormal events, but it described Clara's experience as a series of unusual signs that guided her to the truth. People in Porto began to talk about the case again. Some remembered Anna's disappearance. Others were surprised to learn that new evidence had been found after so many years. The police took the article seriously. They reopened the case and began a new investigation. Clara was asked to share everything she had discovered. She gave them the letters, the key, and her notes. She explained how she had found the items and what she believed they meant. The officers didn't comment on the whisper, but they listened carefully. They contacted international authorities and began searching for Miguel, the former owner of the apartment. After several weeks, Miguel was found living in Brazil. He had changed jobs and lived a quiet life. He agreed to speak with the police. During the interview, Miguel admitted that he had known Ana Luisa. He said she was a quiet and intelligent woman, but he also said she had seemed troubled. He denied any involvement in her disappearance. However, he revealed something important. He said his younger brother, Eduardo, had lived with him for a short time during that period. Eduardo had mental health problems and had acted strangely around Anna. Miguel explained that Eduardo had once followed Anna through the building and had made her uncomfortable. Miguel said he had warned his brother to stay away, but he didn't think it was serious. After Anna disappeared, Miguel said he was afraid. He didn't know what Eduardo had done, and he didn't want to be blamed. He moved away and never spoke about it again. Eduardo had died a few years later from illness. There was no way to question him. The police reviewed Miguel's statement and compared it with the letters Clara had found. The details matched. Anna had written about a man who made her feel unsafe. She didn't name him, but her words described someone unstable and unpredictable. The police concluded that Eduardo was likely involved in Anna's disappearance. Since he was no longer alive, the case could not continue. But the truth had finally come out. Clara followed the news closely. She felt a mix of emotions. She was relieved that Anna's story had been heard. She was sad that justice could not be fully served. But she was proud of what she had done. She had listened when no one else did. She had followed signs that others ignored. She had given Anna a voice again. After the case was closed, something changed in the apartment. The whisper that had come every night became quiet. Clara waited for it, but it didn't return. Days passed, then weeks. The silence felt different now. It was not heavy. It was peaceful. Clara believed the whisper had stopped because its purpose was complete. The truth had been revealed. The story had been told. Clara stayed in the apartment. She continued her work as a translator, but she also began writing a book. She wanted to share what she had learned, not just about Anna, but about listening, about memory, and about courage. She believed that places carry stories, and sometimes those stories need someone to hear them. She didn't forget Anna. She kept the letters in a box and placed a small flower near the wall where the whisper had first come. It was her way of saying thank you. Not for the mystery, but for the connection. Clara had changed. She was no longer just quiet and careful. She was strong. She was aware. And she knew that even the smallest voice can lead to something important. Moral: truth does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes in silence, in whispers, in signs that only a few can hear. If we pay attention, if we stay open, we may discover something that was waiting to be found. Listening is not weakness, it is strength. And every story deserves to be heard. Chapter 6. Silence after the whisper. One quiet morning, a week after the article was published, Clara Martin received a letter in the mail. The envelope was simple, with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note in soft, careful English. It was signed by Ana Luisa. Clara sat down slowly and read every word. Anna had escaped the night she disappeared. She had left the apartment in fear and crossed the border into Spain. For years, she lived under a different name, hiding from her past. She had never spoken about what happened. She was afraid no one would believe her. She was afraid the truth would stay buried. But after reading the article, Anna felt something shift. She saw that someone had listened. Someone had followed the signs and cared enough to search. Clara's actions gave her courage. Anna wrote that the whisper was not a ghost. It was the echo of fear, the memory of a moment that had never been understood. She thanked Clara for giving her story a voice. She said that silence had protected her, but now it was time to speak. Clara held the letter in her hands for a long time. She felt a deep sense of peace. The mystery was no longer a shadow. It was a truth, finally uncovered. The whisper had guided her, not to a ghost, but to a living person who had survived. Clara understood now that the voice in the wall was not supernatural. It was emotional. It was the weight of memory, the sound of pain waiting to be heard. The apartment felt different. The air was lighter. The silence was no longer heavy. Clara walked through the rooms and noticed the small details again, the cracks in the floor, the marks on the wall, the soft light through the window. Everything felt calm. The whisper did not return. It had done its work. It had led Clara to the truth, and now it could rest. Clara stayed in the apartment. She didn't want to leave. It had become more than a home. It was a place of connection, of healing, of discovery. She began writing a book about her experience. She didn't focus on ghosts or fear. She wrote about listening, about paying attention to what others ignore. She wrote about Anna, about silence, and about the power of small signs. Her life changed in quiet ways. She became more open, more thoughtful. She noticed things she had never seen before: a child's drawing on a wall, a forgotten photo in a book, a quiet person in a crowd. She understood that silence is not empty. It holds stories, emotions, and truths. Clara learned to listen, not just to sounds, but to silence itself. She kept Anna's letter in a box with the old key and the folded note she had found under the floor. These were not just objects. They were pieces of a journey. Clara didn't need answers anymore. She had found something more important: understanding. She had helped someone find peace, and in doing so, she found her own. The apartment remained quiet, but Clara was no longer afraid of the silence. She welcomed it. She knew that sometimes the most important voices are the ones we almost miss. And when we choose to listen, we open a door to something real. Moral: some truths do not shout. They whisper. And if we are quiet enough, if we are patient and open, we may hear what others cannot. Listening is not weakness, it is strength. In silence, we often find the stories that matter most. Thank you for your attention. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. It motivates us to make new videos and helps us promote the channel. Thank you.